Hey everybody, it's Holly. I already had recorded the second part, this video right here, the second part to the data series, but for some reason, I think I might have accidentally deleted it. So here we are again, back to record part 2 of the data series. And I've got a Discord for those of you who don't know. The link will be in the description, so feel free to join, and I can't wait to see you guys there. Now let's get started with the HCO policy letter of the 11th of May, 1970, called Logic. The subject of logic has been under discussion for at least 3,000 years without any clean breakthrough of real use to those who work with data. Alright, first thing we're going to do, we're going to look up logical historical figures. That's list of logicians, history of logic, Plato, Kant, Nietzsche. Oh, this is part of a series on philosophy. So, logic in India, Buddhist logic, ancient Greece before Aristotle, Pythagoras, Plato. There's been logic all throughout history, and it's helped to get us to where we are now. So, Hubbard's flat out wrong there for saying all of that. Any of that. It's all bullshit what he thinks. Logic means the subject of reasoning. Some in ages past have sought to label it a science, but that can be discarded as pretense and pompousness. So let's take a look at types of logic. Informal logic, using inductive and deductive reasoning to make arguments. Formal logic, using syllogisms to make inferences. Symbolic logic, using symbols to accurately map out valid and invalid arguments. And mathematical logic, using mathematical symbols to prove theoretical arguments. Okay, got a good idea of what logic is. There's different types of logic. And again, it's all been developed throughout history to help us get to where we are now. If there were such a science, men would be able to think, and they can't. So here he is, just getting rid of all the accomplishments that man has received. I'm going to assume that he says he has his own solution, which is going to help mankind. The term itself is utterly forbidding. If you were to read a text on logic, you would go quite mad trying to figure it out, much less learn how to think. I don't know how true that was back in 1970, and I don't think it was true at all. It's not hard to read a book about logic, and it's pretty easy to understand. Yet logic, or the ability to reason, is vital to an organizer or administrator. If he cannot think clearly, he will not be able to reach the conclusions vital to make correct decisions. Many agencies, governments, societies, groups capitalize upon this lack of logic and have for a very long time. For the bulk of the last 2,000 years, the main Western educator, the Church, worked on the theory that man should be kept ignorant. A population unable to think or reason can be manipulated easily by falsehoods and wretched causes. Thus, logic has not been a supported subject, rather the opposite. That's just flat out wrong. Logic has been greatly supported. Even Western schools today seek to convince students they should study geometry as, quote, that is the way they think. And of course, it isn't. I don't know where he's getting this studying geometry because that's the way they think. I mean, personally, I think geometry is an irrelevant subject, at least for my field, but you wouldn't really know that when you were in school, when you were in, like, high school, middle school. The administrator, the manager, the artisan, and the clerk each have a considerable use for logic. If they cannot reason, they make costly and time-consuming errors and can send the entire organization into chaos and oblivion. Their stuff in trade are data and situations. We're going to learn more about what those mean. Unless they can observe and think their way through, they can reach wrong conclusions and take incorrect actions. Modern man thinks mathematics can serve him for logic, and most of his situations go utterly adrift because of this touching and misplaced confidence. The complexity of human problems and the vast number of factors involved make mathematics utterly inadequate. Mathematics is not the only type of logic, as we just learned. There's different types. Mathematics is not going to solve all the problems, so we find what does solve the rest of the stuff that math doesn't touch. We don't have a misplaced confidence in it. Again, Hubbard is wrong. Computers are at best only servo mechanisms or crutches to the mind, yet the chromium-plated civilization today has a childish faith in them. I mean, I don't know what kind of faith they had in computers back in the day, but now we don't have faith in the computers. We have evidence that they work, evidence that they can do calculations correctly, so we have evidence based on experience. It depends on who asks the questions and who reads the computer's answers, whether they're of any use or not. And even then, their answers are often madhouse silly. Again, I don't know what type of incompetent computers you're using. Computers can't think because the rules of live logic aren't fully known to man and computer builders. Well, they're known to man, but they can't be made to computer builders at the time. One false datum fed into a computer gives one a completely wrong answer. Okay? If people on management and work lines do not know logic, the organization can go adrift and require a fabulous amount of genius to hold it together and keep it running. Yeah, like your supposed genius. Whole civilizations vanish because of lack of logic in its rulers, leaders, and people. Or they just fail. Not because of a lack of logic. They might get attacked and taken over. That's not a lack of logic, that's just war. So this is a very important subject. Unlocking logic. I found a way now to unlock this subject. Of course you did. You find all the ways to unlock all the subjects. This is a breakthrough which is no small win. If by it a formidable and almost impossible subject can be reduced to simplicity, you can't reduce it to simplicity. Then correct answers to situations can be far more frequent. No, your answers to situations are going to be far more frequent. Doesn't mean they're going to be correct. And an organization or a civilization far more effective. Not necessarily true. The breakthrough is a simple one. By establishing the ways in which things become illogical, one can then establish what is logic. Why not just establish what makes something logical? Or talk about logical fallacies, for example. In other words, if one has a grasp of what makes things illogical or irrational, it is then possible to conceive of what makes things logical. Illogic. There are 5 primary ways for a relay of information or a situation to become illogical. 1. Omit a fact. 2. Change sequence of events. 3. Drop out time. 4. Add a falsehood. 5. Alter importance. These are the basic things which cause one to have an incorrect idea of a situation. Example. He went to see a communist and left at 3 a.m. The omitted facts are that he went with 30 other people and that it was a party. By omitting the fact, one alters the importance. This omission makes it look like he is closely connected to communism, when he isn't. Example, the ship left the dock and was loaded. Plainly made crazy by altering sequence of events. I mean, I can understand that perfectly well, despite the fact that I don't think loaded necessarily may refer to... It doesn't have to refer to the verb of loading the ship. It can refer to an adjective of the ship. The ship was loaded. So, I don't know where he's getting this and how it's crazy at all. It makes complete perfect sense to me. Example, the whole country is torn by riots, which would discourage visiting it in 1970 if one didn't know the report date of 1919. Example, he kept skunks for pets, which as an added falsehood makes a man look odd if not crazy. But you need to know if he owns pets, if skunks are legal to keep as pets. You need to know facts in order to be able to figure out what the falsehood is. Example, it was an order when in fact it was only a suggestion, which of course shifts the importance. That's just wrong. I think that's your falsehood. There are hundreds of ways these 5 mishandlings of data can then give one a completely false picture. When basing actions or orders on data which contains one of the above, one then makes a mistake. Reason depends on data. When data is faulty, as above, the answer will be wrong and looked upon as unreasonable. There are a vast number of combinations of these 5 data. More than one, or all 5, may be present in the same report. Observation and its communication may contain one of these 5. If so, then any effort to handle the situation will be ineffective in correcting or handling it. So, we got the 5 pieces of data that makes something illogical. Basing actions or orders on data which contains one of the above one that makes a mistake. Reason depends on data. I mean, it does. You need to know things in order to be able to make decisions and come to solutions. Any effort to handle the situation will be ineffective if observation and communication may contain one of these 5. Use. If any body of data is given the above 5 tests, it's often exposed as an invitation to acting illogically. To achieve a logical answer, one must have logical data. Any body of data which contains one or more of the above faults can lead one into illogical conclusions. The basis of an unreasonable or unworkable order is a conclusion which is made illogical by possessing one or more of the above faults. Now it just seems like Hubbard's just rambling and repeating the same shit over and over again. Logic. Therefore, logic must have several conditions. All relevant facts must be known. Events must be in actual sequence. Time must be properly noted. The data must be factual, which is to say true or valid. Relative importances amongst the data must be recognized by comparing the facts with what one is seeking to accomplish or solve. Not know. One can always know something about anything. It is a wise man who, confronted with conflicting data, realizes that he knows at least one thing, that he doesn't know. Grasping that, he can then take action to find out. If he evaluates the data he does find out against the 5 things above, he can clarify the situation. Then he can reach a logical conclusion. Drills. It's necessary to work out your own examples of the 5 violations of logic. By doing so, you'll have gained skill in sorting out the data of a situation. When you can sort out data and become skilled in it, you will become very difficult to fool, and you will have taken the first vital step in grasping a correct estimate of any situation. So the exercise is going to essentially give you confirmation bias by showing you things that do follow the model, but by disregarding all the other things that don't follow that model. You will have gained skill in sorting out the data of a situation. Not necessarily. When you can sort out data and become skilled in it, you will become very difficult to fool. You already became fooled the moment you started believing this crap. And you'll have taken the first vital step in grasping a correct estimate of any situation. No. They clearly don't have a correct estimate of any situation in Scientology, otherwise it'd actually be doing well. Alright, further Illogics, the HCO policy letter of the 11th of May, 1970, edition of September 23rd, 1977. Data Series 2, Logic, lists the 5 primary points of illogic. There are 3 more points of illogic that evaluators should know well and use. These are: assumed identities are not identical, assumed similarities are not similar or same class of thing, assumed differences are not different. Knowledge and study of Data Series 1R, Anatomy of Thought, and Data Series 2, Logic, will give one an understanding of what these outpoints above mean and how to recognize and use them in evaluation. So again, we're being brought back to this part from the first lecture, first policy letter in this series. Got the whole assumed identities are not identical, assumed similarities are not similar, and assumed differences are not different. Again, this is not sanity, but whatever. HCO policy letter of the 12th of May, 1970, called Breakthroughs. There are 2 breakthroughs, actually, that have been made here in the age-old philosophic subject of logic. The first is finding a datum of comparable magnitude to the subject. A single datum or subject has to have a datum or subject with which to compare it before it can be fully understood. By studying and isolating the principles that make a situation illogical, one can then see what is necessary to be logical. This gives us a subject that could be called illogicality testing or irrationality location, but which would be better described as data analysis, for it subjects data and therefore situations to test which establish any falsity or truth. Data analysis can help find false data or flawed data. The other breakthrough consists of the discovery that no rules of logic can be valid unless one also includes the data being used. Not necessarily. Logical fallacies don't necessarily need the data of the argument. The other breakthrough consists of the discovery that no rules of logic can be valid unless one also includes the data being used. No, you can have logical rules without having any data to analyze, I should say. The nearest the ancients came to this was testing the premise or basis of an argument. Testing premises is good. That's fine, and that's helped us come up with a lot of logical fallacies, which you don't talk about. Trying to study logic without also having the answers to data is like describing everything about an engine without mentioning what fuel it runs on, or making a sentence like, he argued about or she disliked, without completing it. You don't need to have the answers to data to study logic. There's no problem with that. Logic concerns obtaining answers. Alright. We have to look up the definition of logic again. Reasoning conducted or assessed according to strict principles of validity. The study of correct reasoning or good arguments. It's often defined in a more narrow sense as the science of deductively valid inferences or of logical truths. Logic has nothing to do with data analysis. Unless you can test and establish the truth and value of the data being used, one cannot attain right answers no matter what Aristotle may have said or what IBM may have built. And here he is dismissing more things that help us and saying that his way is the only way. Just like he did with study tech and the education system. The road to logic begins with ways and means of determining the value of the data to be employed in it. Without that step, no one can arrive at logic. I'd like to know what he means by determining the value of the data to be employed in it. Two things that are equal to each other and to which a third is equal are all equal to one another. Yeah, that's the transitive property. If A equals B and B equals C, then C equals A. Great. This is often disputed as a theorem of logic and has been ever since Aristotle said so. Why do I have a feeling this is not disputed as a theorem of logic? Wait, transitive property. Let's look up the transitive property. Okay, so all real numbers, x, y, and z. If x equals z and y equals z, then x equals z. If x equals y, then x may be replaced by y in any equation or expression. This is mathematical logic. There's nothing wrong with this. There is even a modern cult of non-Aristotelian logic. I don't know anything about this. I'd have to look that up. But again, completely throwing shit out the window. The facts are that the ancient theorem is totally dependent on the data being used in it. Only if the data is correct does the theorem work. Lacking emphasis on the data being used, this theorem can be proven true or false at will. The philosophers point out the fallacy without ever giving emphasis to data evaluation. You don't need to have data evaluation if the argument contains a logical fallacy. Data analysis. Unless you can prove or disprove the data you use in any logic system, the system itself will be faulty. This is true of the IBM computer. It's true of CIA intelligence conclusions. It's true of Plato, Kant, Hume, and your own personal computer as well. Data analysis is necessary to any logic system and always will be. Ships run on oil, electric motors on electricity, and logic runs on data. If the data being stuffed into a computer is incorrect, no matter how well a computer is planned or built or proofed up against faults, you can get a bay of pigs. In mathematics, no formula will give an answer better than the data being used in it. Valid answers may only be attained in using valid data. Thus, if the subject of data analysis is neglected or imperfect or unknown or unsuspected as a step, then wild answers to situations and howling catastrophes can occur. If data analysis becomes itself a codified subject, which it has, regardless of what formula is going to be used, then right answers can only then be attained. He acts like data analysis isn't a thing. The mind as a computer. The mind is a remarkable computer. It's not perfect. It can be wrong. But then again, he also says that If you're clear, your mind becomes a perfect computer because that's the analytical mind is. And then once you got rid of your engrams and your reactive mind, then your analytical mind is supposed to go unhindered. It's demonstrable that a mind which has the wrong answers removed from it becomes brighter. Prove it. IQ soars. Prove it. Therefore, for our purposes, we'll consider the mind capable of being logical. As processing improves the mind's ability to reach right answers, again, prove it. Then we can assume for our purposes that if a person can straighten out his data, he can be logical and will be logical and can attain right answers to situations. False data stripping, which we're going to cover later, does not help because you're basically taught in false data stripping. If you find a situation, you go through this whole auditing procedure and you're essentially brainwashed and told what is correct data and what's false data. Even though the false data may actually be true, and what they call true may actually be false, it's another way to brainwash people. The fallacy of the mind is that it can operate on wrong data. Thus, if we specialize in the subject of data analysis, we can assume that a person can attain right answers. As an administrator and anyone else has to reach conclusions in order to act and has to act correctly to ensure his own or his group's continued survival, it's vital that he be able to observe and conclude with minimal error. Thus, we will not be stressing how to think, but how to analyze that with which one thinks, which is data. So this whole thing's not going to be about logic. It's going to be about data analysis. This gives us the importance and use of data analysis. Figures, that's why it's called the data series. Alright. What page is this? 1, 2, 3? 3 pages. We're going to get this. Alright. This is the HCO policy letter of the 15th of May, 1970. This is data and situation analyzing. The 2 general steps one has to take to find out what's really going on are analyze the data, using the data thus analyzed to analyze the situation. The way to analyze data is to compare it to the 5 primary points and see if any of those appear in the data. I guarantee you there's more points to look through or to just know about. Your 5 seems so simplified that it can't possibly apply to everything. The way to analyze the situation is to put in its smaller areas each of the data analyzed as above. Doing this gives you the locations of greatest error or disorganization and also gives you areas of greatest effectiveness. So for example, there's trouble in the refreshment unit. There are 3 people in the unit. Doing a data analysis on the whole area gives us a number of outpoints. We then assign these outpoints to A, B, and C who work in the unit and find that B had the most outpoints. This indicates that the trouble in the refreshment unit is with B. B can be handled in various ways, such as his hat, his attendance, etc. Note, we analyzed the data of the main area and assigned it to the bits in the area. Then we had an analyzed situation, and we could handle. Okay. Just because someone has the most outpoints, the most problems, doesn't mean that they automatically have the most severe of problems. B could have the most outpoints, but A could have the most severe outpoints, the ones that are actually causing the refreshment unit trouble. And by using this, you're still not handling the problem. Example, we analyze all the data we have about the bingo car plant. We assign the data thus analyzed as outpoints to each function of the bingo car plant. We thus pinpoint what function is the worst off. We then handle that function in various ways, principally by organizing it and grooving in its executives and personnel. What about the other functions? You're not covering the other functions. Why are you only covering the one that's the worst off? Don't you want to handle every single one? There are several variations. We obtain an analysis of the situation by analyzing all of the data we have and assigning the outpoint data to the areas or parts. The area having the most outpoints is the target for correction. I already said why that's wrong. In confronting a broad situation to be handled, we of course have the problem of finding out what's wrong before we can correct it. This is done by data analysis followed by situation analysis. We do this by grading all the data for outpoints, which are the 5 primary illogics. We now have a long list of outpoints. This is data analysis. We sort the outpoints we now have into the principal areas of the scene. The majority will appear in one area. This is situation analysis. We now know what area to handle. Handle the other areas. Example, 70 data exist on the general scene. We find 21 of these data are irrational. We slot the 21 out points into the areas they come from or apply to. 16 came from area G. We handle area G. Look, it's fine if you handle area G, but handle areas A through F if they have the problems. The remarkable part of such an exercise is that the data analysis of the data of a period of 1 day compares to 3 months of operating experience. So the data you find in 1 day compares to 3 months of the business? This sentence doesn't make sense to me, and I'd love for him to be able to explain this. Thus, data and situation analysis is an instant result where experience takes a lot of time. You can't have an instant result until you have experience in the field and know what you're looking for. The quality of the data analysis depends on one knowing the ideal organization and purpose on which the activity is based. This means one has to know what its activities are supposed to be from a rational or logical viewpoint. Thank you. A clock is supposed to keep running and indicate time and be of practical and pleasant design. A clock factory is supposed to make good clocks. It's supposed to produce enough clocks cheaply enough that they're good enough to be in demand and to sell for enough to keep the place solvent. It consumes raw materials, repairs, and replaces its tools and equipment. It hires workmen and executives. It has service firms and distributors. That is the sort of thing one means by ideal or theoretical structure of the clock company and its organization. Those are the rational points. From the body of actual current today data on the clock company, one spots the outpoints for a data analysis. So just because you know how a clock factory is supposed to be run automatically means you can figure out what's wrong with it? Doubtful. One assigns the outpoints to the whole as a situation analysis. One uses his admin know-how and expertise to repair the most aberrated subsection. You might not need admin know-how in order to fix a section. Because if a machine is broken, or it's creating faulty clocks that are going out to market, you might not know where the problem lies. One gets a functioning clock factory that runs closer to the ideal. Okay, so he admits it's not perfect, but that it's just a little bit closer. Military, political, and PR situations, etc., are handled all in the same way. You did a horrible job with your PR situations. We call these two actions data analysis and situation analysis. Situations are the broad general scene on which a body of current data exists. Data is facts, graphs, statements, decisions, actions, descriptions, which are supposedly true. Outpoints are any one datum that is offered as true that is in fact found to be illogical when compared to the 5 primary points of illogic. Plus point, a datum of truth when found to be true compared to the 5 points. What bugs me is Hubbard's use of logic. So as we know, logic is reasoning, conducted or assessed according to strict principles of validity. Logic doesn't necessarily need to be related to what's the word I'm looking for? Logic is more related to arguments than it's related to scenes. He's finding faults, but that doesn't make things illogical. Alright. Plus point, a datum of truth when found to be true compared to the 5 points. I already don't like this. I don't like how he simplifies it down to 5 points. I'm sure you can come up with more. He thinks everything is so simple when it's not. He makes everything so simple, and then when everything is actually run on his principles, it ends up being shit. For example, the Church of Scientology is run on his policies, but that doesn't make them work. It doesn't make it effective. Because clearly, all this simplification has just ruined things. Alright, we'll cover information collection on the next episode of the series. What are we, 3, 4, 5 pages. Jesus. Okay. Anyway, I want to thank all of you guys for sticking around, watching this. I hope you enjoyed my Oxford capacity analysis. I'm going to put out the wiki video next week. And like if you like the video, dislike if you don't. I don't care. Comment with your feedback or questions, good, bad, or sideways. And subscribe to be kept up to date on future content. Join my Discord. I hope to see you there. And I will talk to all of you later. See ya.